You know, I've been using this iPhone 13 Pro for a full 2 months every single day, day in, day out, and I've learned a lot. And in this long-term review, we're gonna completely ignore the hype machine and only go off of real-world usage. So by the end of this video, you will know whether the iPhone 13 Pro is worth your hard-earned cash. I think we'll start with the part of this phone that I think is probably the most overhyped from its release. And I am talking about the 120 Hz display. Technically speaking, a 120 Hz display should seem much, much smoother than the standard 60 Hz display of pretty much every other iPhone that's ever come out. But in reality, when we're talking about iPhone screen to iPhone screen, there's truly not much of a difference at all. And even despite what many of the reviewers have said, going from a 120 Hz screen back to an older 60 Hz screen, they all said that you definitely noticed then, and truly, it's just not that big of a deal. But what has been great is that the screen can intelligently drop all the way down to 10 Hz when it needs to, which has been so great for battery life. But we'll talk more about battery life in a second. You're gonna wanna hear that. And to finish off my thoughts on the screen, the fact that it has HDR is nice. Like it's a cool feature to have, but I feel like it's just one step above being gimmicky at this point. However, this phone can go up to 1000 nits for screen brightness, which by the way is very, very bright, and all the way up to 1200 nits when it is, you know, showing some specular highlights in HDR mode. And that general screen brightness is truly great. Like when I'm out in full sun and I need to see the phone screen, you can see it easily under full sunlight. And it's leaps and bounds ahead of the iPhone 8 I was using before this. Battery life. The battery life is so good. It really is incredible. Let me put it this way. I essentially never have to consciously think about charging this phone. You know how normally every night when you go to bed, you'll put your phone on the charger to make sure it's got full juice for the next morning, otherwise it'd basically be dead before you woke up? Well, I never really have to think about that, and oftentimes when I forget my phone out in the living room or down in the studio, I just leave it there because I know in the morning it's still gonna have plenty of juice for the first part of the day at the very, very least. Now, one feature on most newer phones in the last couple of years that has been a notorious battery drainer has been 5G. And yes, I can report on the 12 and 12 Pro, 5G absolutely decimated the battery life so fast on those. But what's great is on these new phones with the new antennas, bigger batteries, I have not noticed that at all. Battery life has remained absolutely fantastic, even on 5G, even when you're running Google Maps. It's been fantastic so far. Did I say fantastic enough times? Now, I know when you put these things on a speed test, 5G versus LTE, that the speed differences are massive. But will you notice going from a non-5G phone to a 5G phone as far as speeds go in normal usage? Not really, no. I would say the one time when I've really noticed 5G speeds is we were going on a road trip and I wanted to download a few podcasts really quickly because I knew we were gonna go to a service range soon. And I had to do a bit of a double take on how fast they actually downloaded. So that was nice. I did notice there, but for the most part, not a huge difference. Now, if we are talking about speed, we have to talk about the A15 Bionic chip in these phones as well. Things will run a little bit more smoothly, apps might open a little bit quicker, but again, you're probably not gonna notice, especially not over something like an A14 Bionic or even an A13 Bionic. They're all really fast and really smooth. If you're coming from, well, any previous iPhone, this is probably gonna feel a little bit weighty at first. It's kind of a chunky phone, but funny enough, I've really grown to love the weight of it. Kind of like when I hold like a Leica M2 film camera. It's a tank, but there's something about the weight of that really just strikes me as being a professional tool to create things. And so yeah, weirdly enough, I like the weight of this phone, despite being significantly heavier than any other phone that I've ever had. So this next one is a biggie, and before we get into the camera systems of this phone, I want to get into the exterior body of the whole thing. And I'm going to start with the external part of this phone that I hate the most. Yeah, this camera bump. It is huge, and honestly, I feel like the only phone design to really get this right lately is the Pixel 6 and Pixel 6 Pro. It pains me to say that, but it's true. They've got that bar all the way across. And the reason why this bothers me is you put it down on the counter, like most people do say at work, and if they're like picking away at an app here and there, it's really annoying and also really loud. Now, thankfully, other than this one situation, you're not really gonna notice the camera bump. When you're putting it in and out of your pocket, it doesn't catch, it's not weird to hold, everything's totally fine. So maybe I'm being a little bit nitpicky, but that is my job. And you know, terrifyingly enough, This phone has never once been in a case since I bought it. 2 full months of pretty hard use. The phone has been lightly dropped, it's been put in pockets with keys, I've shoved it into camelbacks with a whole bunch of other stuff while I've been mountain biking down like single black and double black diamond mountain bike trails. And this phone still looks brand new. Even on the typical like high wear surface areas, you know, like on the bottom edge here, or on the bottom edge of that ridiculous camera bump, that's where the phone gets put down over and over and over again onto all kinds of surfaces. And honestly, I cannot find one fault on this phone after 2 full months of use. Nothing, nada. I am super impressed. All right, camera system. And first off, I just cannot believe that Apple left out 2 of the most basic yet such essential features out of their native camera app. It makes me so mad, but we'll talk about that in 1 second. I have taken nearly 1,000 photos and videos over the last couple of months in pretty much every situation you can imagine. And throughout all that, I can confidently say that I have never seen better images out of one of my smartphones before, ever in my life. And in my opinion, yes, that is even true if you're coming from a 12 Pro or even from one of the newer flagships like the Pixel 6 Pro. You would probably agree with that, right, Joules? And especially older phones like say the iPhone 7 or the iPhone 8, this camera system will absolutely blow the doors off of it. So with the 3 lenses on the phone, it is a 13, a 26, and a 77mm lens set, I guess you could say. And between those 3, I would say it's probably one of the most usable sets of lenses. There are other phones out there with, you know, super long zooms and teles and things like that. And honestly, for me, I think I would use them like once or twice a year. Whereas I use all 3 lenses out of this phone pretty much all the time. But I would personally love to see the main camera sensor and lens, which is a 26mm equivalent lens. I would love to see it closer to a 30 or a 35mm equivalent lens. I often find that the main camera is just a little bit too wide for most situations. And that's got the sensor shift technology, it's got the best sensor, and so that's the one I want to use the most. Now, back when pretty much all smartphones only had 1 lens, having that pretty wide field of view made a lot of sense because you only had 1 lens to work with. But now that you've got an ultra wide that you can always crop in on if you really wanted to, I would just love to see a little bit tighter of a lens for that main shot. Between the larger apertures and the larger sensors and keeping the pixel density nice and low by staying at 12 megapixel for all 3 sensors, which actually is a really nice thing, by the way, but we'll get into that in a different video. It really seems as though Apple listened to what photographers and videographers like myself not only wanted, but needed in order to actually trust the cameras and sensors on a device like this to make our art, to make our creations. Case in point, I just went on a filming road trip for my other channel, Lone Ranger, and I've been so impressed by the camera on the iPhone 13 Pro that I actually left both of my main cameras at home and only used the 13 Pro for all of my third-party shots and the thumbnail photos. But having said that, when it came time to get those very critical shots, or when I had to get a very specific shot for like a thumbnail image, I had to dive into third-party apps. And remember when I was complaining at the beginning of this segment about them missing 2 such critical things in their native camera app? Well, this is where those come in. And what I'm talking about is the ability to change shutter speed and white balance. I don't want to get too far into the weeds with this, but it just boggles my mind that even on Apple's, Pro phones, they couldn't include those 2 super simple adjustments in their native camera app. So when I want to get the exact shutter speed that I need to shoot nice, good quality video, I've got to go into something like Filmic Pro, which is a pricey app. Or when I want to shoot a thumbnail image and I need, say 0.08 of a second or 1,000th of a second and no slower than that, I've got to use an app, say like Moment app. It's workable, but again, I just don't really understand why those things aren't there. But beyond that, they have given us some fantastic camera hardware, a plethora of resolutions and frame rates and bit rates and color spaces. It's a pretty solid device to create some pretty awesome visual content. So, should you buy this phone? Well, if you've got the cash laying around and you want the best Apple flagship phone, well, it's a no-brainer, just go buy it. But I'm willing to bet most people watching this video aren't in that situation. Now, if you don't have $1,000 burning a hole in your pocket and you want to make sure that this purchase is really, really worth it for you, it really comes down to this. If your main intention with this phone is to create things with it and you need to squeeze every ounce of quality out of those cameras and sensors that you possibly can from a smartphone, this is probably the phone for you. However, if you're mainly consuming content on this phone and you're just taking regular everyday pics and video, then you may want to look at the iPhone 13 or the iPhone 12 or 12 Pro. Because in this case, you can probably get the phone with all of the tech that you would need and use on a daily basis without having to spend the extra cash for those pro features that you may not use. Thanks for watching, everybody. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next review video. Cheers.